All right, so when we left off, like 6 weeks ago, something like that, we had basically finished all of the historical section, right? So all of the different Bible stories in Daniel. The last one we did was Daniel and the lion's den. But we had talked, remember, about the big statue that that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed about. We talked about Rakshak and Benny in the fiery furnace. We talked about Nebuchadnezzar the cowman. Oh, here comes Drew and Ben. All right, good, perfect. We talked about the handwriting on the wall. And then the last time we were together, we talked about the lion's den. And so at the end of that, who was in charge in Babylon? What empire? Not yet. The Persians, the Medes and the Persians. So the important thing for tonight, gentlemen.
Hello,
And lady. Morning, good evening.
Good German.
So. All right, we will pause for a moment here, Nathan, as everybody gets settled. Wow, it's nice to have this many people back. Look at this. It's crazy. It's already gone against you as a black mark, just so you know. And wait, where's Ashton? Oh, that's good. Oh, there we go.
You gotta go, you gotta.
Say hi to Astra. Astra. Sandy's taking a nap on the bed. He may come out. Oh, looks like Sandy might come out. So maybe we'll just put Astro up here as a constant reminder for all of those who tune in that, you know, the golden doodle and the Bible study, what could be better than that? All right, so we're in chapter 7, and remember, there's sin. Remember that Daniel, at least in the first part, is set up in what we call a chiasm, right? That it goes in and then comes back out. And we talked about chapter 2 being prophecies about the Gentiles. And then we talked about chapter 3, which was kind of a judgment, but rescue, right? God's faithfulness. We talked about chapter 4 being a Gentile king who recognizes God. And then we started moving back out. We talked about chapter 5, right? That's the handwriting on the wall. That's the Gentile king who doesn't recognize God. And then in Daniel chapter 6, that's the lion's den. So that's God's faithfulness again. And now we're in chapter 7, which will wrap up the first of these chiasms, this pattern in the book. And again, it's going to be prophecies about the Gentile kingdom. Okay? So let's turn to chapter 7. And we will read what it is. And what we need to do is bear in mind chapter 2, because what we're going to see parallels between, oh, wow, that's like really slanted. We're going to see parallels between chapter 2 and chapter 7, okay? So let's open up and let's take a look at chapter 2, chapter 7, verses 1 through 8. And that would be anybody. Got it, Ben? All right. And you're reading from what? NIV?
Yes.
Okay.
In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions passed through his mind as he was laying in bed. He wrote down the substance of his dream. Daniel said, "In my vision at night I woke, and there before me were the 4 winds of heaven churning up the great sea. 4 great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea. The first was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being. and the mind of a human was given to it. And there before me was a second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, "Get up and eat your fill of flesh." After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard, and on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. After that, in my vision at night, I looked, and there was before me a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large lion teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. While I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another one, a little one, which came up among them. And 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a human being, and a mouth that spoke boastfully.
Okay, so when does this take place?
First year of Belshazzar.
And who was Belshazzar? Do we remember who he was? He's grandson. Okay, so he is the king in chapter 5, right? He's the guy who actually sees the handwriting on the wall, and he is there ruling Babylon when the Medes and the Persians are outside attacking and laying siege to the city. He's the one who calls Daniel back from retirement and asks him to interpret the handwriting. Okay, so this is in the first year of Belshazzar. Nebuchadnezzar died sometime around 562 BC. Then remember, there were a couple of other kings that were sort of in between that ruled for a couple of years and then, either died or got assassinated. So this, we think, is about 552-ish BC. So the book of Daniel that we have in your Bible is not laid out in chronological order, right? It's laid out with the kind of the accounts of that chiasm, right? The Bible stories, the history in the first half, and the second half is laid out around the prophecies, okay? So chapter 7, if we were to actually take it and put it in the right order, would be somewhere between chapter 4, which was the last we heard of Nebuchadnezzar, and chapter 5, which is the downfall of Belshazzar to the Medes and Persians. So it really would go 4, 7, 5 if we put it in chronological order. But it's interesting to see that God has put it in a different order for us to emphasize different things. Okay, what does Daniel see? He's got this vision, right? And so this is the first time we see Daniel having his own vision. Before, everybody else had visions and he interpreted the visions. Now he's having one of his own, and it's going to end up disturbing him. And so the first thing he sees is the 4 winds. Well, so what anybody have any idea what that might represent? The Hebrew word here, or the Aramaic word here, is ruach, which means spirit. And people talk about it as the Holy Spirit. They'll capitalize it, but it's not necessarily a capital S. It could just mean any kind of spirits, or it could mean, what is it translated in, Ben? What did you have? Verse 2, and behold,
Beasts?
no, what, something's acting. I saw in my night vision, and what?
In my vision at night, I looked, and there before me were the 4 winds of heaven.
Okay, so the 4 winds of heaven, all right? So that's what is being used here, sort of north, south, east, and west. And so it could possibly be God's Spirit stirring things up. It could possibly be even angels. We don't know exactly what that means. It could also be that this is Daniel's way of saying, hey, all of nature, right, is acting together to bring about this vision. And what are the winds doing?
Stirring the sea.
Stirring what sea? The Great Sea, okay? What's the Great Sea? Any ideas? Is that what you said, the Mediterranean? Yeah, that's probably what it is. There are different places in the Old Testament, in Numbers and Joshua, where the Great Sea is equal to the Mediterranean. Okay, which makes sense, right? I mean, Daniel, right, being on, having been born in Israel, bordering the Mediterranean, the Babylonians have conquered all this way. They fought the Egyptians who are who are bordering on the Mediterranean as well. So it's probably exactly what makes sense here for them. Now, what's going to arise out of the sea? Beasts. All right, so let's talk about our beasts. What's the first one? So what we're going to do is we're going to compare these to the visions in chapter 2, right, which was Nebuchadnezzar's dream and what he saw, because the common interpretation of chapter 7 is that Daniel is really seeing the same thing that Nebuchadnezzar saw in chapter 2. But there's a reason that how did Nebuchadnezzar see these kingdoms arise? As a statue. And what was the statue made out of?
Gold, iron.
So kind of precious type metals, right? It starts with gold and it goes down to the least precious. And so there's a view that perhaps because Nebuchadnezzar sees this, and who was the head of gold? He was, right? Well, of course, right? If you give the king a dream, he's going to pick, hey, I'm the best king, so I'm going to be the head of gold, right? So perhaps what we're looking at is man's way of looking at the kingdoms in chapter 2, but God's way of looking at these kingdoms in chapter 7. All right. So the first is, say it again, it's like a, okay. Here's his name. He's kind of a happy lion, okay? Because that's the best I can do. He's got paws that he'll put up. And what will happen to him? Go ahead, Ben. What happens to this?
Sorry. Wings are torn off and it's lifted from the ground, just 2 feet. But it doesn't
See,
have
that's
wings.
pretty good.
But it doesn't have wings anymore.
Okay, all right. I just drew the wings. Now I'm going to pluck them. Like the local pluck and pluck. And, oh, no, Astro. And what's he given?
The mind of a human.
Ah, okay. So this says mind. Does anybody have anything different? Heart. Okay, same word. Interestingly enough. So it could be translated either way. So I'm going to draw a little heart. But I could also draw a little brain and we'll put it inside. Okay. I know you missed this part. This is like if you didn't miss anything else about Bible study, you missed the drawings. Okay. Now, is it a lion? It's like a lion. That's exactly right. So that's important, right? Daniel's not saying, hey, I saw a lion, right? He's saying, I saw a beast. The closest thing I can come up with was, it kind of looks like a lion, but it's not a lion because it's got these wings. Well, it had wings before they got plucked. And so it's this weird thing. All right. What's my second?
Like a bear?
like a bear, okay? All right, this is gonna look more like a Wolverine. I should draw one too.
That would be slightly. Maybe two. There's this piece. You wanted that image, didn't you guys?
I really did.
You really did.
All right, this has gotta be the worst bear. It does kind of look like a buffalo. All right, but it would be in a really impressive buffalo. That's what I was trying to draw. Let's just pretend that this is a bear, and and how is he described? He's got these three ribs,
Raised up on one of its sides.
and he's raised up, so it's almost like he's like, "Arr," right, kind of that way. So I don't know exactly how to draw this. So I will give him one really long leg and one really sort of short, stumpy leg. Okay, so he's raised up because he's got to use a crutch because that other leg is too short. Okay, is it a bear?
No.
Okay, even if you hadn't looked at that, it's still not a bear. It's like a bear. So it's something that it's a big beast. Maybe it's, you know, furry. Maybe he'd never seen a golden doodle, and he says, it's like a. Well, he probably would have said it's like a really cute, cuddly, good pet that everybody should have. But he did not describe it that way. Okay, and what's it told to do?
Get up and eat your fill of flesh.
Get up and eat your fill of flesh. So it's all you can eat rib night. Okay. All right, what's my third one? All right, you thought my bear was bad. Now we're gonna go for a long tail. Not really. Yeah, he's terrible. Looks like an alligator. Here's his. No, that's not too bad. And that's it. And he's a leopard, right? So looks like he might be either a fat leopard or a pregnant leopard. But how about we put some spots?
Like Mr. Peanut or something.
Well, I invite you to come up after class and get a much closer look. Yeah, you should. And look, when you guys have your Old Testament class this semester, you're going to get to Daniel and you're going to go, oh yeah, it's Mr. Peanut, right? Chapter 7, Mr. Peanut. All right, what's special about our leopard thing? Is it a leopard?
No.
No, it's not. It's like a leopard. And what does it have?
4 wings.
4 wings.
Like a bird.
Maybe it has dragon. I don't know.
It also had 4 heads.
Oh, oh man.
Oh,
Okay.
what you doing?
Oh, yeah,
Last
yeah.
one?
Just make it.
The drawing's bad.
Okay. This was a
That
little.
looks like the thing from Percy Jackson. You know what I'm talking about?
Kind of, yeah. Okay.
They're the same
Okay.
At least it looks like something. I think we can all be happy about that. All right, and what is said about what is said about this? So we'll just in case we'll say it's like a lion, like a bear, like a leopard, and if I walked into the room and just saw those, yes, I had to write those out. Thank you, Drew, for pointing that out.
It was given authority.
Okay, so it's given authority to rule, so. And this is given a heart or mind of a man and stood up. And the bear gets all you can eat rib night. All right, last one. What do we have in the last?
10.
Well, hold on. What?
You have large.
So does Daniel say in the first three beasts, he says, hey, it looked like a lion, wasn't a lion, but at least it looked like one, looked like a bear, looked like a leopard. This one looked like what? So this is different enough that Daniel can't think of something to tell us that it looks like.
He just said it's the most frightening and terrifying and most powerful.
Okay, so what are we gonna draw? We'll do that. Don't you worry.
They had 10 horns.
Yeah, I'll get to the point.
Oh.
A T-Rex.
Yeah, a little better. Oh, there you go. Okay,
It's the most normal looking one.
okay, so these are our iron teeth.
It's creative license.
Hey, look, all I will tell you is that when we played Pictionary, my team ended up doing pretty well. All right. I guess he's got a second. Yes, I am.
Maybe next time we should just play Pictionary with him and then just not designate.
I drew a dog.
That's not very fair. All right, how many horns does he have? He has 10. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And what else do we see? Then he's got what?
Looks like the monster from Monsters Inc. Like
You know,
monster.
Yeah,
that's a compliment.
There was an 11th floor.
there's an 11th horn. Okay, and what's the 11th horn?
Very small.
All right, small horn. In fact, I think for the 11th horn, we may even have to use a different color. All right, so he's got we'll put it right on his nose, small horn. And what's that horn have? How is the little horn described?
Three of the first horns were uprooted before it.
Okay, so we're gonna take 3 horns and we're gonna go, yeah, you're out of luck, you're out of luck, and you're out of luck. What else though?
It had eyes,
Ah.
and a mouth and stuff.
He's got eyes and he's got a big mouth. He's gonna be boastful. He's gonna say, you stink, okay?
So yeah, you and I.
Yep. So when you read about Bible prophecy, you will read about the little horn of Daniel. Okay? It's just a very common, like if you're just trying to understand the book of Daniel, that's one of these terms that will be out there. That is the little horn. So what do we know about the final beast? So we don't know, he can't liken it to anything. Okay, it's got this little horn that boasts. And what about the beast itself? It's got iron teeth. And what's it do? Maybe it tells us what it does later.
Speaks boastfully.
Speaks boastfully, okay? All right, so those are our 4 things. Now, I don't know about you, but if you woke up from a dream and you had dreamt about my stick figure interpretations, it might have troubled you. Because it troubles Daniel, okay? What do these represent? Well, skip ahead and go down to verses 15 through 17. What?
Wait, do you want us to read it?
Yeah, you want to read it?
I'll read it. 15 to 17.
Yep.
I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit, and the visions that passed through my mind disturbed me. I approached one of those standing there and asked him the meaning of all this. So he told me and gave me an interpretation of these things. The four great beasts are four things that will rise from the earth.
Okay, so now we know what they are. They're four kings or kingdoms. Some of your translations may say kingdoms. The word in Aramaic is the same, so you can use it either way. By the way, who's Daniel asking? Who's he asking?
One of them.
One who stood by. So apparently we've got the ocean, right? We got the beasts coming out of the ocean. And then we got some guys, standing by. And then we got Daniel, and we'll give him like a long, flowy road. All right, that's Daniel. I guess he should have shoulders. I'm just gonna put a D on there for Daniel. Okay. So there are observers. There's somebody standing by that Daniel's actually able to go and ask. Who do we think that would be? Any ideas? Is it his golden doodle?
Yeah.
Could be, but I don't think it is. We don't have any record in scripture of a golden doodle providing interpretation. All right, we don't know, right? Because it doesn't really tell us who it is. The best guess is that these are some kind of angel. And we say that because as we get later into Daniel, we're going to find that Daniel speaks to angels, right? Angels come and talk to him. And so the reason, you remember that Daniel is not considered a prophet by the Jews, even though he's in the prophet section of our Bibles. And the reason is because Daniel doesn't talk directly to God. He doesn't get his messages directly from God. He gets those messages through angels or through dreams or visions. Okay, so the idea, we think, is that Daniel, he doesn't know what's going on, so he's going to go say, hey, what is this? Specifically, this fourth beast, which really disturbs him. Okay, so the best, well, I'll say the best. It's really hard, right? Because there are things which we automatically assume are true, but there are some challenges with the traditional interpretation. So I'll tell you the traditional interpretation. The traditional interpretation would be that this is Babylon. Okay, and this is the gold head. Hat, makes curly hair in the cell. Eyes. Oh, is that might be Lolo. Yep. All right, we'll let Lolo in. All right. Got a long Babylonian kind of beard. Curly.
She's been so confused when she joined.
All right. That is not a bad head. Okay. So.
Is that Godzilla?
I told you.
Actually, kind of, yes. So
That's a label.
I didn't even have to label it. That's good. This is why Pictionary, man. Lauren, we're in chapter 7 of Daniel. We're talking about the four beasts in the vision that Daniel sees, and that is the fourth beast that doesn't look like anything else. Just so you know, this is the beast that looks like a lion. This is the beast that looks like a bear, not a buffalo. This is the beast that looks like a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. And now we're talking about, okay, so this is, chapter 2, Babylon. This was made out of what? What metal was the head made out of? Gold. Okay. Right? So why do you think that this might line up with with the lion-like thing who gets its
Lion?
wings plucked and given the heart or mind of a man and stood up. What happens to Nebuchadnezzar? Remember chapter 4? Right? Nebuchadnezzar is boasting about what he, all of this stuff that he's done. And what does God do to him? Makes him the cowman, right? Okay, makes him the cowman, okay? And then what happens at the end of that chapter? He returns back to normal. And in fact, he recognizes who God is and issues a proclamation. So perhaps it's a picture of, the lion, a really strong beast. It goes forth to conquer. It's got wings, which typically signify speed, so it moves quickly. But then those wings are plucked, right? And the power is taken away from Nebuchadnezzar. But it's restored, and he's turned, or he's given the heart or mind to a man and stood up on 2 legs. So now he's no longer, why should you put tail on? Lions have tail. There you go. Now it doesn't look like a peanut, right?
Now it looks like a mouse.
Lauren, I need you. You're not here to draw my drawings for me. Okay, but we can
Not gonna lie.
see why this might line up with Babylon, okay? And Nebuchadnezzar and what happens to him. All right? So the bear lines up with what? In Nebuchadnezzar's dream, in the statue, what's the bear? Who? No, Rome comes later. Who conquers Babylon? The Persians and the Medes. All right. And what part of the statue did they represent? Yeah. How about shoulders and arms?
This statue,
Yep.
that's why I remember it.
Gosh, I'm terrible at this.
It's hard to draw on my board.
It's hard for me to draw anything. All right. So this is sort of our Arnold Schwarzenegger, arms and chest. All right, kind of standing like this. Okay, sort of, kind of. Stop it. What's it?
You're really trying to hold it in.
He's sort of formed on one side, right? Y'all are just mean to me. That's okay. Here he's got like a little tattoo on him.
I hurt my mom.
Put mom on the other arm. Okay. What's the metal? More or less valuable than gold. All right. You got the ribs here. You got the bear and the ribs. Now, is a bear as strong as a lion? If you take a
I'd say a
Kodiak,
bear is stronger.
say it louder, Lauren.
I'd say a bear is stronger, probably.
Depends on which bear, right? Don't think of Winnie the Pooh. Think of like a Kodiak, or big grizzly bear that you potentially put up against a lion. Sure. Is it as fast as a lion? Does it have, in the vision, does it have wings? No. So, no. The lion's wings got ripped off,
No,
but the bear never has wings, right? So it's a slower moving, but strong. In fact, why show it raised up on one side? Well, because in the Medo-Persian Empire, the Persians were actually stronger, right? So you could make an argument that, okay, it's tilted towards the Persian side. The Persian army fielded about 2 to 2.5 million men, right? So think about that, think think about the revolution, okay? The Revolutionary Army, right, Dash, how many men were under Nathaniel Greene's command? 4,000 at the height, right? How many people are at Yorktown? 20,000, right? This is 2 orders of magnitude higher than that. So when the Persian army went on the march, it was kind of slow, but it had huge power and strength, okay? All right. So now what we've got is our leopard. Who's the third empire? The Greek Empire. Why show it as a leopard with wings and 4 heads? Alexander the Great will conquer the known world in 10 years. Once he rises to power, his armies move very quickly and they're kind of light on their feet. So whereas lots of power here, but sort of slow and lumbering, very speedy warfare, right? Yeah, all over here, the German word blitzkrieg. What did that describe? What? You got to speak up.
Wasn't literally like a lightning war.
Lightning war, yeah. And what was the idea?
Yeah, it was fast.
Yeah, the Germans used it to say, we're going to use overpower and speed, right? And move as quickly as possible to get behind enemy lines and win the battles by surprise. So we can say, well, the 4 wings makes sense. Why 4 heads? We're going to talk about this in the next chapter, in chapter 8. Chapter 8 is all about the conflict between the Medes and the Persians and the Greeks. But what will happen is that Alexander's going to die. He's going to die in Babylon, and he's not going to have left his empire to anybody. And so the empire will split into 4 different parts, going to each of his 4 generals. And as we read through the rest of Daniel, we'll see references to the king of the north and the king of the south, right? And we'll find out that those are references to the parts of the kingdom that get split up, okay? So our guess is 4 heads, each representing one of the generals after Alexander passes away. What part of the statue does this represent? Well, it's the belly.
The stomach.
It's the belly and the thighs of what metal? Bronze or brass. Here, we'll put a belly button here. All right. So that leaves us with what? Rome, right? So we've got, okay. Now, Rome, interestingly enough, was different from these other empires. Whereas in these other empires, the victor tended to try to take the losing culture and assimilate it into the empire, right? Why is Daniel in Babylon to begin with? What happened to him in chapter 1? He gets taken.
He got taken.
Babylon. What? Go ahead, Lola.
He gets taken by Babylon and is effectively assimilated into their culture.
Yeah,
To
right.
become, he's like taken to be a scholar.
And they're going to teach him the language and the arts and the culture and the science, right? And the idea is for him to go out into the Jewish community and teach all of those things to the other Jews so that now they become part of the Babylonian Empire and they lose their identity as Jews. Rome didn't do that. Rome just crushed you, right? If you rose up against Rome, they had very little tolerance for other empires, for other cultures. They believed the Roman culture was the best. And they just sort of stamp you out, which perhaps makes sense because you've got this thing with iron teeth and it's described as crushing and grinding. Okay? Which part of the statue? Legs. Ooh,
The leg.
I think it's just the legs. Give him some knees, right? These kind of look like fat legs. We'll give him ankles. How's that? I don't know. Yeah, skinny chicken legs. Okay.
Got really skinny calves.
And what's this made out of? Iron.
Iron.
Okay. Now, what's missing in Daniel's vision?
The feet.
And so I'm going to kind of draw a line here. And I'm going to put, and we're going to have, oh gosh, that's going to be terrible. I actually don't even like feet. So like me trying to draw feet is bad.
Not gonna lie, feet are hard to draw anyway,
No,
whether you like them or not.
oh good, I'm glad to hear that. I think that foot's better than that foot, but it's okay. All right. And what are the feet made out of in the statue? Iron mixed with clay, right? So it's not the same as the legs. Iron plus clay. All right. So that's our. We'll connect him. I guess we better give him. Maybe a really long. Yeah, there we go. All right, he looks like he's probably in a freak show at the circus, but there you go. Now, what ends up happening to the feet in Nebuchadnezzar's dream? Good thing or bad thing? 50% chance.
They get crushed.
They get crushed by what, Nathan?
I believe a hand takes a boulder and crushes them, but it's not a hand that belongs to man.
It's a stone cut without hands that comes in and crushes it. And after that happens, a kingdom is set up that's going to be an everlasting kingdom. Okay? So we're going to see a parallel here. So this is why people look at this and say, okay, I can kind of draw the statue in chapter 2. I can kind of look at the beasts in chapter 7. I can line them up. Kind of makes sense. There are some problems. There are some potential issues here. In Daniel, somebody find me Daniel 7:17. It's the thing that Danny just read. What's it say?
Those great beasts which are four kings which arise out of the earth.
Okay, which arise out of the earth. Does anybody have anything different?
Mine said will rise.
Will rise. Well, that's important. Do they rise, right, at the same time? Have they already risen when Daniel's having his dream? Well, clearly Greece and Rome had not arisen yet. Right? So, or is it, well, we've got these two kingdoms that have arisen, right? When we say two kingdoms that are going to arise, well, Babylon was already in place, right? Nebuchadnezzar has passed away. He established the kingdom. So when we think about, okay, the timing here and try and figure out, is this parallel or could Daniel be seeing something different? I'm going to say, I think Daniel's seeing the same thing. I actually used to take a position that said, no, Daniel's actually seeing something different. And then I sort of realized that the structure, that chiasm, I think that makes it so that it looks like he's seeing the same thing. Because I think the 10 horns are going to tie actually back here to the 10 toes. And the little horn is a little bit different. Is he grown to the toe? Possible. The other thing is that Babylon is never really depicted as a lion, like in art. Medo-Persia is never really depicted as a bear. So, you know, in fact, there's all sorts of art over ancient Babylon, and there's lots of dragons and dragons with wings, but not a lion. Now, maybe it's like, I don't know, who saw, maybe it was The Hobbit, and they actually sort of made the dragon look a little bit cat-like. Maybe that's kind of what Daniel saw, right? So we shouldn't necessarily, you know, die. No, I'm just saying from an art perspective. Right?
I was like,
They asked me if I would come illustrate for them, and I said, no.
right, kind of busy right now.
Let's see. In verse 7, it says, after this in the night visions, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the other beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Well, there's an argument that says that that word before does not mean in terms of succession, right? So if I say, hey, Dash went before me in line, right? That meant he went first. Or I could say Dash is standing before me, meaning Dash is actually standing in front of me, right? So it's not an order issue, it's a placement issue. Does that make sense? Okay, there's an argument here, therefore, that instead of it being, oh, well, it's a lion and then a bear, then a leopard, and then this thing, these things actually all rise at the same time, right? They're contemporaries. So, and if we say the fourth beast is Rome with the 10 heads, well, really this looks more like the revived Roman Empire, because it looks more like the feet than it does the legs. Right? There's more parallels between the beast here and the feet, which represented, you know, the 10 toes, which would be 10 kingdoms that are going to rise up, not the legs. So perhaps, you know, I still think it's probably the same thing, but clearly God is giving Daniel a vision that is emphasizing some different things here, as opposed to the vision that he gave Nebuchadnezzar. There's all sorts of then people who say, well, if these are contemporaries, then what country has the symbol of the lion? England. Yep, exactly. And in fact, the coat of arms in England is the lion standing on its, you know, rear legs. What country's the bear? Could be, in fact, the People's Republic of California. Russia, yeah, right. Now we don't talk about it as much that way today, but when it was the Soviet Union, it was the Great Russian Bear, right? It was the bear and the eagle, right? How about the leopard? Jamaica?
China?
Probably not.
China?
What? China, did you say?
China, maybe.
No, maybe
Yeah.
there's a possibility of something in Asia, you know, well, maybe you're not, but you probably have heard of it, at least in economic terms, the Asian tiger, right? Maybe not, because that was like a 1990s thing when the Asian economy was so strong. Yeah, okay, see. Well, so, and that, look, that's the problem with symbols, right? They change. They change all the time, right? So that even 20 years ago, stuff that we would have talked about, you know, when I was doing business stuff, not the same stuff that we talk about today. There is actually a country in Africa called Botswana that has the leopard as its flag. So there's a possibility that some people say, well, this is a bunch of African nations that are going to get together. But I think the best way to look at this is still to say that these parallel the statue of Nebuchadnezzar from chapter 2. Okay? All right.
What do you think it is?
What? What,
What do
Lola?
you think the leopard is? What do you think the leopard is? Because you said the bear was Russia.
Well, that's what I said. So I said there's a possibility that this could be Asian countries. It's a possibility this could be African countries. But I think we have to reach with the grammar to make these contemporary that all rise up at the same time. What'll be interesting is it will say later on that the fourth beast is going to get destroyed, and the powers of these will stay on for a little while. So there are parts of me that make me look at it and go, hey, it is talking about sort of the end times and what happens maybe at the Battle of Armageddon. And yet, oftentimes what we see in prophecy is sort of a near term and a second longer term fulfillment, which kind of overlap. It's sort of, remember that picture I drew where I said, hey, it's like you're standing on, you're standing on one mountain and you can see this peak here, and you actually see this peak too, right? But because of where you're standing and looking, right, you can't actually see the valley that happens in here, okay? And so when we look at stuff in the Old Testament, we look at God talking with prophecy about the end times, right? We're seeing from here, right? Or we're seeing here, but we're missing, for example, this church period that's in here, which nobody in the Old Testament has any idea about, right? The church, Paul tells us in Ephesians, is not revealed until the New Testament. So Jesus in the Gospels, he's not speaking to the church, right? Even when we look at the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount, you see all this stuff where, and he'll say, hey, if you don't forgive your enemy, God the Father is not going to forgive you. Well, as Christians, we look at that and go, hey man, that's not the same thing that Paul taught. Paul taught that all you had to do was believe on Christ, right? And you're going to be saved. Not, oh, and by the way, believe on Christ and forgive your enemies, and do this, and do that. So if you look at some of the, if you look at some of the things that Jesus is saying in the Gospels, it makes total sense if he's talking to Jewish people under the law. It doesn't make sense to apply those things to the Christian church, which comes later. So anyway, I think what we're seeing here is the same view of intermediate history, right? Near-term history for Daniel, which is going to be, hey, Babylon exists, the Medes and Persians are coming in chapter 5. The Greeks, he won't be around for, but they'll be coming in a couple hundred years. And then we skip, almost like we're skipping the legs of the Roman Empire, the first Roman Empire, and we go right to the iron mixed with clay, and he's tying that up here to Godzilla. Okay, so that's the first half of chapter 7. We will wrap it up there. The second half, we'll get a little bit of interpretation, but we'll also find that we end up in the throne room of God, and the Ancient of Days is going to be there, and the Son of Man is going to be there. And so we'll talk about what that means and what actually happens there. So, make sense? Any questions?
Do you think all of the contemporary countries are going to be old world countries?
Do I think all the
As in,
contemporary
like,
countries are going to be what?
Old world countries, like countries over
I
in
don't
Europe and
know,
Asia and stuff like
Lauren.
that?
It's a good question. I don't know. There's prophecy people always look and say, well, where is America in prophecy, right? And it's I think it's very hard to find. I don't think you can really find America in the Bible per se. That doesn't mean that America's not going to be around at the end times, but it does to me mean that it probably is not a major or important player in terms of prophecy.
Cool.
So, okay. All right. Anybody want to close us out in prayer tonight? It's been a while. I know you're out of practice. Drew, you got it. Yes, thank you. Do it.
Dear Lord, we thank you for today. We thank you for the ability to come to the Austin's house and be able to study your word. Thank you for those who are preparing Daniel 7. I pray that in the midst of all the chaos, that we can still trust you and that you know that you have a plan and good. I pray that just tonight that we would enjoy time together and get ready for the start.
Amen. And Drew makes a great point in this prayer, right? It's hard to figure some of this stuff out. Some of the stuff you go, that's easy. Or some of the stuff the Bible will actually say, oh, this is this, right? So you can't get it wrong. But some of the stuff is really difficult to figure out. The point, though, as Christians, is we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to worry about, okay, what is this piece? It might be interesting to try and figure it out and look for clues and go, I think it's that, oh, look, there's this flag, or the Germans used to call their tanks Panzers. Maybe that means this and not, but if we believe the church is going to be raptured before the Antichrist is revealed, which is what I believe will happen, then this is all either interesting history about what happens or, stuff that we get to, I'll say, watch from the bleachers, right? But not have to worry about being around when it's going on. So.
But it's compelling to know.
Yeah.
Because you can acknowledge God's history and what he prophesies and what has already come to be. We know that what he tells us will come to be has not come to be because of what has already been done.
I think that's an important point, right?
And we also want to tell others that they aren't there, because that's going to be terrible.
Well, when you read the book of Revelation,
Oh my God.
things go from, bad to worse, and it doesn't really get better until Jesus finally comes, and he's going to show up, and then 1,000 years later, people are still going to revolt against him. It's like nobody learns their lesson ever. But Patty's right. The good thing is, hey, if we can take God's word when he tells Daniel, hundreds of years before the bear comes, the leopard comes, and Rome shows up, and those things actually happen, and wait till we get to chapters like 10 and 11, where we really start seeing very specific things that God is going to reveal to Daniel about, hey, this king's going to do this, and this is going to happen here, and somebody's going to poison somebody else, right? Then you go, okay, I get it. So if I can trust him on that, and that all happened, I can trust him on the future stuff yet to come. All right, I'm going to stop us recording.